Hello, world. Welcome to the 290th climate change emergency protest here in Gettysburg, Pennsylvania. I just gave a really wonderful talk about climate change in my 290th talk, and I didn't hit the record button, so I'm bummed out. So that's the way it is. I got to make sure this thing is still going. But anyways, while you're waiting to hear me say my lovely words, this is the TikTok chart, the International Climate Change Table of Catastrophe. I developed this a few years ago, and it's a scale that I came up with. And this is where we are right now, 1.6 degrees above the 1880 baseline. And the level of catastrophe is basically a 64 rating right now. And I don't want to see 64 times as great, but my guess is that's going to start happening, and it probably is happening. So we're at 1.63 degrees above the 1880 baseline. If you look at the 1750 baseline, in reality, we're at 2 degrees above the 1750 baseline. Either way, the level of catastrophe keeps doubling every time we increase a tenth of a degree. So we're in between here and here. It goes 64, 128, 256, 512, 1024 times greater as far as a catastrophe level. The next one is 2,048, and then 4,096. It's exponential growth. Okay, so you can't expect to survive if we keep doing that, increasing the heat level and not doing anything to tackle climate change. So the carbon dioxide level is running out of control, and then feedback loops are kicking in, and that's what we're seeing. I apologize if this talk's not as good as the one you did not see, because I don't know what I covered exactly when I talked extemporaneously. So this is climate change talk number 290. It's June 13th, 2024. And next week will be number 291, June 21st, 2024. My wife and I were down at the protests around the White House in Washington, D.C. last weekend. And it was several people deep, went all the way around the White House, the 1.5 miles. And it was a ton of people. It was the best organized event I've seen ever. I've been to climate change protests, been to other protests. I was in New York City in 1982 for nuclear arms. This one was really well organized. I was so impressed. And Jill Stein, she's campaigning for President of the United States, was there and gave a great speech. No other presidential candidate was there, and she was really awesome. And the photos of our adventure down there are on my Facebook page. If you flip down and go to that. So right now in Florida, they've had a 1 in 1,000 year rain event with 10 to 20 inches of rain yesterday so far, and they're expected to have another 10 inches of rain or even more in some places. It's crazy. So 1 in 1,000 year event, but it's soon to become a 1 in 1 year or 1 in 6 month event, no longer a 1 in 1,000. So they were getting rain at somewhere around 4 to 6 inches per hour, and that's life-threatening catastrophe going on. Miami, in addition to that, has compound flooding, which is ocean water comes up through the porous limestone through that into the into the flooding, even on a sunny day. Then if you get rain on top of that, it can't drain away. So places are really getting hit hard. And Miami, in fact, has gone to the extent of raising up some of their sidewalks and town centers and things like that. It's not going to work. When you get the next hurricane as a category 4 or 5 or 6, even, that's going to level the city or cause massive destruction. There's no clear-headed thought. They're going to have to come up with evacuation plans. I've heard a guy say today that there are 2.5 million climate change refugees last year. 2.5 million. So roughly almost 10% of the country, or no, 1% of the country is on the move at any given time due to climate change reasons. Out west in Las Vegas, they've had days on end of 110 degrees and above, which is 43.3 degrees Celsius. Here, it's supposed to be above 90 degrees. The average is 82 this time of year. It's supposed to be 90 degrees. And then the next 28 days, I think it'll be above 85 degrees. And in fact, some of the days will be pushing 100 degrees. And what's concerning me is this is a huge tourist area with children, older people and things like that, pets, and they're staying in hotel rooms and things like that. And if the grid collapses, there's no thought process in this town as to having a cooling center running on generators and things like that for an emergency. There's no thought about hardening up the area for flooding and extreme heat events and whatever happens. Right now, I've suggested on many talks about having a greenway down the alleys and having that set up, as well as this open air lot that they have planting trees and having a forest and a park there rather than putting in an apartment complex. And the reason why you want to do that is because it's a cooling effect of the apartment or the park. And some guys talking is driving me nuts. So you rather than a cooling effect, if you put an apartment complex, you're going to have a heat island effect, and the heat will not leave at nighttime. And instead of having a tourist attraction with the greenways and everything, they could do an east-west greenway through the alleys. There's two set of alleys you could do. There's also a southerly alley that goes from the courthouse out to Steinway Avenue, which is a tourist center that you could do as a greenway. And why am I talking about this? Because this is every town in the USA. Every town could think of innovation, things to do, shading with nets and things like that over the sidewalk, and they're going to have to think about that stuff. It's what's coming. Yeah, this next 28 days is going to be hell on earth for here, and I don't do well in the heat. I'm not cut out for climate change at all, and we'll see how it goes with that. But there's always things you can do, like jump in a little baby pool of water, just stay in there, or various things. Stay under the shade trees as long as you can. It's still going to be hot as anything if you have trees. See, they're cutting down trees here like crazy, restoring back to 1863. Sounds great, but it's really dumb-headed thinking by the Department of the Interior that they're not planning, again, like our government, for climate change. So the CBS anchor last night on the news was covering the floods in Miami, and she said, "How long will this last?" To the weather guy, "How long will this last?" And I thought, man, what a question. The weather guy could just jump all over this, and he didn't, of course, because they're corporate shills, and he, bubble-headed thought process. They can't think their way out of a paper bag. But when she says, "How long will this last?" he could have easily have said, "The rest of our lives. It's never going to end. It's only going to get worse. You might have periods where it abates slightly, and then it comes back on us and hits twice as hard, as per my chart." But, he let it go. The rest of our lives is the answer for that, as to how long it'll last. So right now, the United States is engaged in endless war. We're spending uh, 900 billion a year on military, and then another however many billions on the Veterans Administration, and however many billions on militarized police. You see these police attack the protesters for trying to stop the endless war in Gaza, and they come in with their ride gear and everything else, and their militarized cars. They're not even cars, they're tanks. And it's like, why are we spending all this money on this stuff? Endless war, endless, rather than diplomacy. And these guys in the State Department right now are worthless. They're warmongering idiots rather than chief diplomats. And I was saying to Tanya, I was saying, man, back in the 70s, you didn't hear. I know people don't like Henry Kissinger, but you didn't hear him being an a-hole on the air. He was a negotiator, and that's how the Vietnam War ended up stopping. He was a negotiator as to what was happening. He wasn't a jerk that goes in and grandstands all the time. And they got 3-4 guys in the State Department that go on the news all the time and just make pompous statements. And then you got this guy in the White House that just is slaughtering people by sending endless weapons over to Israel and acting like he's trying to come up with a plan to stop the slaughter. He is the slaughter. Okay, the United States gives Israel 69% of their weapons. When a bomb gets dropped, a 2,000-pound bomb especially, it is courtesy of the USA and Genocide Joe and the U.S. Congress, Democrats and Republicans. Great job. So right now, we're spending a trillion a year or more, easily more, on endless war. Meanwhile, the Inflation Reduction Act, which part of it was supposed to include climate change, which isn't going towards climate change, it's going towards redoing the bridges and things like that in the roads, and it's continuing with the car culture. There's no talk of mass transit. There's no talk of what we can do in towns. I could come up with 20 ideas, probably in about 20 minutes, as to what we could do in towns and spend that kind of money on it. But nope, we're not going to do that kind of stuff. And we need groups getting together and saying, we need to use this money for that. And we need to increase the money exponentially, a huge amount. But so that's 38 billion a year we're spending on climate change, which isn't about climate change. So they're saying, the United Nations was saying that we must spend 7 trillion a year, the world must, in order to combat climate change and do the right thing. And this doesn't mean redoing roads and things like that. It involves a whole lot of other things. So in this country, there's no mass transit. If I want to go anywhere, I have to drive my car. I can't hop on a bus and go to the train station and take a ride real fast down to Washington, D.C. I have to drive, things like that, at least 3/4 of the way till I get down towards Washington, D.C. So it's crazy. We're in such a car culture. So there's no real plans about climate change. This town has no idea what's coming. They're not hardening up, and I have lots of ideas, and people don't care. And they think things will keep going the way they are until maybe this week with or the next month, where it's 28 days in a row above 85 degrees. And if the grid goes down, I'm severely concerned, as I said, about youngsters and older adults and ordinary people in general that are out of shape. So, no case has been made by the previous presidents, Bush, Obama, Trump, Biden, or the Congress as to why we have to take action on climate change. They haven't made any sort of case, and of course, people don't know. The media, they're not describing the urgency of climate change. They'll cover the event, but they won't say why this is happening. And if we don't get a hold of this situation, it's going to keep happening worse and worse. So what is happening is proof that the theory of climate change is over. All right. 10 years ago, when I was talking about climate change, here's the theory. This was going to happen. This was going to happen. This is exactly as I said is going to happen. And it's no different than what I predicted what would happen. And it's going to get much, much worse based on my chart. So we're no longer in the theory. We're into the reality of climate change, and it's only going to get worse. So how long is this going to last? Well, it's going to last for the rest of our lives. And, right now we're here. The kids will incur, not only the events happening now, also their own worse events. So it compounds on top of itself. So younger you are, the worse the situations are going to get worse, worse, and worse with these leaders in charge. You cannot have a Biden or a Trump continue to be in charge and expect to survive. I am concerned that these two get in charge, and Biden cranked out more oil than any country ever has before in 2023. I mean, it was crazy. He set a world record for that. So we won't survive it unless we put someone in the White House like a Jill Stein with the Green Party who actually has plans as to how to thwart this climate change thing, or at least slow it down and stop doing stupid stuff. So it's your choice, whether you want to accelerate towards death. And that's what's happening. People are dying right now. You're losing your properties, things like that. Millions and millions and billions of dollars are being lost as well as lives. So vote Biden, Trump, lose it all, or have a chance with Jill Stein and the Green Party. Catch you next week. That'll be number 291.